Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Singh, and I'm the founder of Publication Academy, your online training partner for higher ed career advancement and professional development. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today for this installment of our Career Pathway series, Exiting Academia. Today, we have a fascinating interview with Dr. Morgan Carter, who successfully transitioned from completing a PhD in behavioral neuroscience into the exciting industry vertical of healthcare. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Over now to our amazing Publication Academy interviewer, Dr. Gertrude Nantra.
Hello, everyone. Dr. G. Nantra here. And once again, I have a wonderful guest with me today. Today, I have with me Dr. Morgan Carter. Welcome, Dr. Carter.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So let's get started with talking about your educational background.
Yeah, sure, would love to. My educational background was all in the neuroscience space. I received a BS in neuroscience and psychology back in 2013 now. Throughout my time in undergrad, I worked in a basic science lab studying mechanisms of various behavioral neuroscience questions. In conjunction with that, I worked for, or volunteered at rather, a traumatic brain injury support group, and I became just very interested in the neural basis of our social behavior. Many people with traumatic brain injury succumb to social impairments as a result of their injury, and that was just a really interesting part of that patient population. It really made me think about how fragile our behavior is and that it's a result of our biology. So I really wanted to study something like that in graduate school. So straight from undergrad, I went on to a PhD in behavioral neuroscience at Boston College. I was there for about 5 years, where I studied exactly what I wanted to, the neural basis of social behavior. I won't go into the details of that research, but we were studying really the various pathways in the brain and the hormones that drive those pathways in various social settings and animal models. The goal of that was to really inform our understanding of diseases where social impairment is a hallmark feature, like autism or schizophrenia. After that, I took the pretty standard academic path. I went on to a postdoc. I did take a kind of minor pivot at this point, I would say, because I actually wanted to get into more neurological disease, work a little bit closer to something that would translate to humans. So I stayed in the neuroscience space, but I joined a lab that was doing preclinical epilepsy research at Cleveland Clinic. So I was still using animal models, a lot of my skill sets from grad school, but was doing probably a little bit more translational research in that the mechanisms we were trying to study would really inform how we understand and how we treat a neurological condition.
Amazing. So you went into a postdoc, but then you pivoted into a career outside of academia. What led to that? What led to that decision?
Honestly, it was probably mostly lifestyle decisions that led me to do that. I loved my lab work. I loved the questions I was answering. I was still really motivated to do those, but I think the reality of a career tied to grant success and also job location was forcing me to kind of think outside the box and outside the traditional academic path. I worked both in my PhD and postdoc with advisors who were early in their careers as independent investigators. So I saw firsthand really what it took to get those labs started, secure funding, build everything from the ground up. I really went through that twice. And I uniquely appreciated the challenge of being a young PI, what it takes to secure funding, and that you really do need to be open to going where the jobs are. And after a while, I'll say unfortunately, but it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, that kind of didn't align with my personal wishes and wants anymore. I knew I wanted to stay in a certain location. I didn't want to spend my weekends grant writing, frankly. And so I started to think about careers that may be better aligned with what I wanted for my personal life to look like too.
Right. Yeah, that's very, very helpful. Thank you so much. And I think a lot of people identify with that because sometimes academic jobs can be very location independent, location dependent.
Yeah.
And for somebody looking for something that's more flexible or who cannot move because of family or for whatever reason, that can be challenging. So thanks for sharing that. So, what do you do now? And what does a day in the life look like?
Yeah, I've had two non-academic stops, so maybe I can briefly explain how I got to my current
Yeah.
role. The first thing I did after I left academia was actually product strategy and growth consulting. So consulting was one of those things where all through the, professional development seminars in grad school, people are like, you could go into consulting. And I was like, great, I don't know what that means. I don't know if anyone cares about what my knowledge base is in. So I had always heard that was an option, but I didn't really know what it would look like or what it meant.
Right.
um, the last year of my postdoc, I actually did some moonlighting for a boutique consulting firm. It was small, only about 25 people. I found that through a personal connection, and they needed help like reading scientific papers, synthesizing the findings. So I did a little work on the side to see if I would like that or not. So I'm happy to dive. That's a whole nother story, but I did do a little.
Right.
That was kind of my first foray into the business world. We were broadly working with R&D leadership at life science and material science companies to figure out what they were working on the research side and where it aligned with needs in the market. So really trying to think about how to make their research and early stage engineering or scientific efforts head towards a commercially viable product. And I say that because that step was really, I think, pivotal for identifying my current role, which is quite niche. I didn't really know anything like this existed. But I now work for Cleveland Clinic Innovations.
Okay.
So we are the commercialization arm of a massive hospital system. And what we do is work with any of our employees who are developing a commercially viable invention. So that could take a couple different forms: medical devices, new drugs, new therapeutics, new digital health tools. Those are really the four buckets we work with. And my first job is to scout all of the new technologies being developed. We are a massive organization of almost 85,000 employees globally across several continents. And so we have the luxury of a really exciting pool of things being developed in-house. So my job is to go figure out what it is people are working on, to figure out if it's something our office will want to help support and develop.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know this
Amazing.
existed. I did find it on LinkedIn for what it's worth. So it was kind of a serendipitous find, but it's really great because I work specifically with our research institute where I did my postdoc and our neurological institute. So given my background in neuroscience, it's really exciting to work both still with the scientific community and then our clinicians in the neurospace.
That
So
is so amazing.
yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but no, I just love it, right? Because here you are using your scientific knowledge really to push forward what generally we hope would be useful tools to human health.
Hmm.
But you talked about finding this role on LinkedIn. Did you go type in innovations? Like, how did you find it?
I actually just saw it. It's funny because I saw the posting when I don't even know why I was on there. I wasn't even looking. It just kind of stood out. It was like I guess the algorithm knew it was
Right,
worth
right. I
sharing
already
with me.
knew.
Um, and they were really looking with someone with scientific or clinical experience. So we've got PhDs and MDs on our team, and those that had some experience in consulting. I don't
Yeah.
think either of those are necessary for the job necessarily, but it's really helpful because we do get into the scientific or clinical nitty gritties with our fellow coworkers on what they're working on. And
Right.
then our goal really is to see the commercial viability. So when it comes to our doctors or our nurses or our researchers, they are not business-minded people. They
Right.
see the problem, they're working on the solution. Our job is to help figure out how that solution can best impact patients down the line. So we need to think about how to make it a product, something that someone's going to want to buy and use.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see the different perspectives come together. You still get to appreciate why the core science or engineering behind an idea is novel and interesting. But
Right.
you really get that kind of practical, like, how are we going to use this? Why are we going to use it? Why does anyone care to use it? Sort of lens as well.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. So you saw it on LinkedIn, and I love that you said that there are two things I picked up. First of all, you were on LinkedIn, you were not even necessarily looking. So you applied on LinkedIn, and then the interview process went from there. I'm assuming.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then I love the fact that you said that, clinicians are not always business savvy, right? And so, whether that's a nurse or one of the physicians or the researchers there, they are just looking at the problem that's in front of them. But what you do is then see if that innovation is commercially viable and if it's worth developing. Because
Yeah.
I mean, as much as we want to develop all the solutions to all the problems, there are some that end up becoming commercial successes than others. And so, having that understanding. So, where did you get that business acumen? Did you get that from your first job, or have
I,
you had to just learn that on the job?
I've had to learn a lot of it on the job. I
Okay.
think I got the broad concept of it when I was in consulting. A challenge of
Okay.
being a consultant is you're not in with a company. You are brought in for a specific product. You get some purview into the decision making process, but you don't really know the considerations a business has until you do it firsthand. So
Yeah.
for my current role, I would say I've learned most of it on the job, especially because we're working in healthcare, which is its own beast of an industry. Unlike consumer
Mhm.
products, where there's a business selling something to you or myself and we decide if we want it, healthcare has a much more challenging roadmap. There's many decision makers. There are different people paying for products than who are the ones using it. So I think I really had to learn the healthcare perspective on the job in that context.
And on top of that, there are regulatory processes, right?
Yeah.
That everything needs to go through. So you can even develop something, and it's never going to see the market because the FDA decides that it's not something that is going to be, So definitely different.
Exactly. Yeah, and that is one element. The other thing I would add is just the decision making process at a big healthcare system. It's often many different groups involved, many different voices, unclear who the decision maker may be ultimately about a given technology or tool or device. So it's a lot to navigate both internally and externally, but having
Yeah.
that perspective's an important one for this space.
Absolutely. Which brings me to that. It's a perfect segue into the next question I was going to ask you, which is, what transferable skills have you found to be most useful to you in what you do, both with when you moved into consulting and then now with this innovations scouting kind of role?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is how to ask probing questions, both for consulting and for this. A lot of my job is getting beyond that surface level explanation of why something is cool or we should care. We really need to understand why someone picked a problem to try and solve.
Yeah.
Another part of my role is actually inventor education. So we run training programs for our employees about how to invent. So I do it through education and in the core features of my job, where we really are asking people and really diving in to understand, what is the problem? And is the problem that you're proposing a solution for a symptom of a bigger problem, or is it the core problem? And you really
Right.
have to get comfortable pushing people to answer that, because a lot of these are passion projects. I'm still just in awe that there are surgeons who, after 12-hour days, go home and make devices in their basement. But
Right.
these are passion projects, so you want to be mindful that there's a lot of care and thought behind them, but you still need to really push the thinking to make sure that they're solving the right problem, because that's where the value really is.
Right. 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 Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, so
So
probing questions.
asking probing questions. What else?
I think under good technical understanding. It's funny because my background's all in neuro, but it was in basic science. So now that I've had to learn a ton of the clinical side. Our research institute comprises of, let's say, 12 different scientific departments. I'm out having conversations about their science in cancer biology and immunology and all these spaces I never worked in. So I think that ability to pick up technical concepts quickly will be great in other roles, because it's highly unlikely that whatever industry role you go into is going to be perfectly aligned with your very narrow PhD or postdoc research. The other thing
Right.
where that really brings value is we oversee a lot of collaboration with industry. So a lot of startups approach us and say, hey, we have a cool technology. We need a clinical partner. Can we work with you guys to develop this product? In which case, you really need to know what it is they have and what they're offering and what their technology can do. So being able to dive into those technical details is something I use every single day.
Amazing, amazing. Okay. I was thinking about this as you were speaking, and it was amazing to me how, yes, you left academia, but in some ways, you're still working very closely with academics.
Yeah.
So, if the Cleveland Clinic is a world-renowned academic institution,
Correct.
right? Training so many academic and healthcare institution. So, you moved away, but you didn't move away, and that's pretty exciting because I think that's perfect for somebody who might be watching this and may be thinking, well, I don't want to leave all of that behind. Well, here's evidence that you don't have to leave everything. You don't have to leave scholarship, research. You don't have to leave all that behind when you move into a job that is not at a university per se. So I love that you're sharing this. You're sharing this with me. What was the hardest part? Well, what was hard for you when you made that decision to work outside of academia? Was there anything hard about that decision?
I think the hardest part was there's kind of like a death of your former self. I think a lot of us in
Right.
academia, being in our field is a core, something we identify with at our core. It's
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 a
kind
core
of,
identity. Yeah.
yeah, it is a core identity. So I think for the first couple months or so, it was a little challenging to kind of mourn the loss of like that old view of myself. And it sounds kind of silly, but I hope it resonates with people, because I think for those outside of academia, it sounds a little weird, but I think those who were in it know that feeling. It's like we were really in this for a reason. And
Yeah.
it's hard to walk away from that, especially, of course, there was a lot of time put into it. But I think everyone will have to go through that mourning process to some extent. But I think the good news is very shortly after into your next endeavor, it's so clear the benefits of going through that training. I said this through consulting and this job, like everything is so much more interwoven and related than you can anticipate until you're actually out in something else. So I think you'll find that it's just a version 2.0 of you. It's not that you lost a prior self. So
Yeah.
that was definitely, I'd say, the hardest challenge for me.
Yeah. That's a really good perspective to share. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that, Morgan. Well, we're coming to the end of our conversation. This has been great. Thank you so much for sharing what you
Yeah.
do and the insights into how you found this job. So, as we come to the end, what would you say to somebody that is just about to finish their PhD or finish their graduate program and they're looking for opportunities, and maybe something you said sparked their interest in this path? What should they start doing to set themselves up for success?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts here. I think the first I would say is, be honest with yourself about what you want. I think we've all trained in an environment, even if you've had a great advisors, which I did, that really doesn't put you as a person first. think we've all made sacrifices, nights, weekends, locations, whatever, for our academic training. And I would just say it's okay to form your job search around what you want for your personal life. Um, and it not you don't have to constantly be sacrificing. I live
Absolutely.
in a city that is not ripe with opportunity for biotech startups, so I had to get creative about what those jobs might look like for an academic. So for me, I think be creative in the types of roles you're thinking about. You can do that through a lot of early networking. If you're listening to these sorts of things, you're probably already um, doing that to some capacity, but just get out there and see the vastly different routes people go into. I think for bench scientists, the kind of obvious step is go be a scientist in industry. I'd encourage you to think beyond that. Like maybe you want to get away from the bench entirely. That's fine. There are a lot of places that will use your skill set. So just get out there, start talking to people. I think most are open to cold outreaches to share their
Yeah.
experience and learn how many different routes you can go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those tips. That this is very, very helpful. And it has been such a pleasure chatting with you, Morgan. Thank
You as
you.
well. Thank you.
Absolutely.